Think you're doing great work? Well, what do your clients have to say? You might actually be very surprised. So tune into this one because you're not going to want to miss it.
Brian,
Johnny.
I think back to the years when I was asking you to jump on board with Hen House
I
so
know
that
what
we
you're going to
can
bring up. I
take this
can't
thing.
believe you're going to bring that up.
I'm going to bring it up. And the reason that you finally said yes after many times of saying no is that I was actually finally open to feedback and taking things as constructive criticism and not personal attacks.
Totally forgot about that.
Well, I mean, it was a very long time ago. I was, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think feedback is, I'm so glad that this topic has come up because feedback is, it's everything. It makes us better. It makes sure that we stay on task with what's needed for our clients, for ourselves. But I think feedback is one of the things that we often avoid getting,
Mm-hmm.
or we end up getting it from the wrong places. And by the
Well,
wrong places, the people who absolutely love you the most.
this is true. Now think about it this way, though. Let's think back to the formative high school or college years.
Yeah.
People are terrified to give an honest assessment because they don't want people to give them an honest assessment. So when you do critiques, which everyone saw as a bad word, it's not. It's what do you see that I'm not seeing that I could potentially make better?
Mm-hmm.
That's really what a critique is. It's what are you seeing? What am I blind to at the moment?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to go with it, but it does mean you should be open to it. And that I think is embedded so early on in our educational system. I think it's hard for people who own businesses to get out of the mode of being terrified of being critiqued. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that there's three areas, and I know we were talking about this particular thing, and we sort of isolated these three places where I think feedback can fall short based on ourselves. And part of it is patting ourselves on the back for the work that we do. Where, you do a project, you kind of know if it hits, right away. You're like, oh my goodness, wow, that is really, really good. And so that's it. You're done. Like, pat yourself on the back, you're done. And there's nothing else that can make this better. The other is if something didn't go quite as well as you wanted to, you start to make excuses that are all external excuses versus what you didn't do for a project or what you ignored about a project that could have come out during a feedback process, a feedback loop. And then the other part, and I mentioned it before about, sometimes the wrong place to get feedback are the people you love who love you the most because they just want to protect you and see the best for you. And sometimes there are clients who, may not give you the raw feedback that you really need to make something the best it can be. Am I missing any, or is that kind of the thing in terms of some of the mistakes that we might make on our feedback?
I think it's some of the mistake. I think you've hit it the nail on the head. And before we proceed, I'm not sure we were always great at soliciting feedback. And we're going to get to solicitation in this. But I remember what changed. And it was sitting with a large biomedical company that we were working with and talking to the owners and realizing that they absolutely went out and solicited the how are we doing amongst their clientele.
Yeah.
And that to me was mind blowing. And it shouldn't have been. What a great way to immediately know what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, taking all of it with a grain of salt, sure, but also being really legitimate with that information as well and making the changes you need to change. So
Yeah.
I think for both of us, actually, if I recall, that was sort of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Wow. And we're not doing that. We should be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think it falls into a few things. So you might have a project with a client and everything is going swimmingly well. You know the goal at hand. You finish the project. It's great. And all along the way, maybe they see the first review and are like, whoa, this is really great. Ding, there's my feedback. Then you go into second review. It's like, oh, this is awesome. Let's just make these 2 changes here. Cool, I can do that. Ding, there's your second feedback. And then at the end, they're like, hey, here's the final piece. Did we miss anything? We think this looks really great. Da da da. And you're like, yeah, this is perfect. We're all set. Ding. You think that you've gotten all the feedback that you need for a project, but that couldn't be further from the truth. People in that moment, so that's where you would get a great testimonial from someone, but the testimonial is not feedback. And so what you want to do is it's not just that. That's part of the places where you can fall into that trap of not having good feedback from someone after the fact. After the project is wrapped, what Brian was alluding to, having sort of that little survey, or just asking the question of like, how did we do? Where could the process have been improved? What did you think of the piece? Where are some places that you would have loved to have seen in it? All that kind of stuff. It happens after the fact. And that can happen in a bunch of different ways. It could be a little survey that you could create that, they do it and they can submit it anonymously. If there's just one client on the docket, it was from them. Or if you're serving a bunch of different clients at the same time, it's just coming back as just sort of, anonymous feedback that you can take and start to make some good changes. I'm
gonna elevate this though.
Yeah, please do.
Because I've taken so many surveys from companies like, was our person on the phone right from 0 to 5? Was our person kind and courteous? 0 being the lowest, 5 being the highest.
Right.
Did you get the information you needed? 0 to 5.
Right.
These are very, very closed answers. But when you say, how could we have made this experience more seamless for you?
Perfect. Yeah.
Right? So the project. They love the project. They're happy with the project. What could have gone better for you? It also allows them to take a step back and say, you know what? It would have been really nice if they had shown up an hour before we needed to shoot, as opposed to 5 minutes before we needed to shoot. Whatever it is, you're going to get that feedback, real tangible information that will help you change the direction or the focus of that customer service that you're offering along with your production.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think one of the things that's important to maybe we can put a little framework around it is sort of the benefits of feedback. Like I know when you were sending the notes on this episode, you call the design of feedback, right? The benefits and the critiques and their benefit. What fear? That's my favorite. What fear should be telling you? We got to dive into that, and then hearing it all, and then focusing on what matters. Because I think that's critical. So let's jump into that,
Let's go for fear, because that's my favorite. If you don't think you should be doing this, or it's a waste of time, that's actually fear talking. You don't want to know.
Yeah.
You don't want to know because either your production is being compared to somebody else's. Great, so what? That your service wasn't really up to snuff because your people left trash everywhere. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever it happens to be, you are trying to avoid it. And there's no other excuse for not wanting feedback. Period. If you can't take feedback, then get out of the business. Get out of any business. Sit in an office, do literally nothing but what comes across your desk, and don't interact. Feedback is what makes the creative endeavor spectacular.
Yeah.
A lack of it is ego. And just don't give in to fear. Go for it.
My fear, I had fear, and it was because of exactly that. I knew what they were going to say, and I didn't want to hear them say it. And the day that you turn that around, and number one, if you know that things are not right in certain areas of the service chain and all that, well, then make the changes, start to improve that. And it's not going to happen overnight, but just change it over time and figure out what's the most important things to change first. And then you kind of keep going from there, and you just grow with it. But the fear is very real, The critique, though, if you're open to it, and that's part of it, boy, ego, Brian, ego, pride. Oh, that idea that no, what I did is perfect, or how I do it is the right way. I mean, that's not an approach to life, you know? Life is to be about constant evolution and changing and growing. And we have to be open to what others have experienced. It's like, is it Maya Angelou? They'll forget what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And so if you're open to that critique of what that customer experience was throughout their whole time with you and, you know, in the past, and it means that there's a place where you can actually make a massive impact on them. So
Hmm.
imagine they gave you that piece of feedback and you were able to improve that, and suddenly the next time they're with you, they see it. Like they see that change that they were a part of. That goes a long way to building, to really continuing to build trust, and your relationship
Absolutely.
will just blossom way beyond that. So that's one of the biggest benefits to being open to critique. You gotta tell the ego to take a seat in the back. Ego can stay with you. They can stay on the bus, but they got to take a seat in the back. So
Well,
yeah,
I think that's the thing. I think we're so conditioned that we're the professionals. We're the professionals. We're the professionals. And it's, we know our business. They know their business. And if they're hiring a vendor, we become part of that experience.
hmm
So yeah, you may know best, but you're not saying it the correct way or doing it the correct way or
yeah,
showing that you have that mastery. It's one thing to excuse the feedback as it's being delivered. It's another thing to contemplate the feedback and then make the excuses. For instance, well, I didn't have studio lighting that day and we were supposed to be filming outdoors. Yeah, I get that. I
yeah,
And it's legitimate, it's valid. But what did you do in the weakest moment? What were you able to pull off? Did you use a 3-point lighting methodology when you were inside using natural light, using the overhead cans? How did you position the people who were talking? Did you show mastery, even in that circumstance where you couldn't provide the absolute best to
right,
your ability because you didn't have your gear? Did you at least use the structured methodology of what we do to do it the best you could with what you had?
right.
So don't shy away from that and say, well, if I only had my. No,
Mm.
look at it with much more critical eyes, because frankly, if you're ever in that situation again, the goal is to do better and to do
Yeah,
better and to do
yeah,
better. So
yeah.
critiques are really critical. Critiques are the only thing that actually make you viable beyond your first year in the business. You have to keep
That's it.
expanding your own self-awareness, knowledge, and ability when things are not exactly the way you want them,
hmm
as well as when you have everything you need to get the job done. So
Yeah,
use it. Don't shy away from that critique, and don't make excuses while the critique is happening. Be contemplative and think about it long after the critique on how you could have done something differently.
that's awesome. And there's a the last one is to hear it all and focus on what matters. And that's an interesting one because there are two things at play here. One of them is hear what they're saying and filter it. Like start to begin to sort of filter the why behind something was said, because sometimes it's not as clear cut as you might think.
No.
If it's about the service, it's one thing. Sometimes it can be just how they experienced it, and you can have
Mm-hmm.
it can lead to a really beautiful conversation between the two of you if you're open to it. But if it's something having to do with a project, let's say, these are sometimes the things that are unsaid, right? You have to, going back to the psychology side of it, you have to kind of look at it and say, well, what is it that they're not telling me here? Sometimes they'll say, I don't like that color for that background, or,
Mm-hmm.
that font choice, or, whatever that happens to be. And it actually has absolutely nothing to do with those things. What it has to do with is how they're feeling as they're watching the piece. Maybe it's not moving at an energetic pace that they would like, or maybe it's missing its mark in terms of the emotion of it. Maybe there's something that's not pulling at the heartstrings quite the way that they want, and they don't quite have the vocabulary to really share what it is from an editing standpoint or a filming standpoint that can help in that. So the things that jump out to them at the moment that it's hitting them might be a graphic, might be a color, might be a composition or something like that. So you have to understand where that might be coming from, and ask some follow-up questions. If it's triggering something in you, ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask it. Say like, okay, we'll take a look at that. He goes, let me ask you something. Do you feel that it's got the energy that we were looking for in this piece, or do you feel that it's hitting the emotion in the way that we were hoping to? If you start to ask those questions, an interesting thing happens. You could leave the font and the color exactly the same, but change the pacing or what have you, and they will never notice the font and and the color background again. They'll just say like, that's it hit. So you have to sort of get into that mode of not only taking the feedback in, but really understanding it and just reflecting on it. Brian used that word reflection. I think that's a great word because I think that's what it comes down to.
Well, do you remember there was one time where somebody was going off about their hairstyle? Constantly and hated the video, but it really came down to hating seeing themselves. So we minimized their time on screen. We allowed their voice to be there, but we minimized their time on screen, and suddenly they were euphoric. And it just came down to them saying A, but it was really about their hairstyle. It was really, and it was understandable. I mean, we're all self-conscious, but once you realize that's like, what if we minimized your time on screen and did this? It's
that
like,
was everything.
And then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh. And then it became a pacing. Well, the pacing's much better. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's
all
okay.
all we did in that one, I remember that. It's like all we did was eliminated their close-up. They had the wide and the close-up. We just eliminated the close-up, had them in on the wide for a very short amount of time. It was like a few shots of B-roll added, and that changed the entire thing.
Nothing else changed. And they were ecstatic, and they owned it. And that was the beauty of it, because afterwards, like, oh, it was really just me being self-conscious. But we had to determine that. They didn't tell us that until after we made the changes, after we really listened to what was going on.
Yeah.
So it's fun if you allow it to be, and if you allow feedback to create a loop of just creating better content consistently. If you're scared of it, you can't ever achieve that level. You just can't.
Yeah.
So lean into it. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to wrap it up, but that's it. It really has to be said and resaid. Lean into it. It's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. And I think that's a great segue, because I think as we look at reframing feedback and its place, instead of fearing it, and I smile every time I say the words fear the feedback. Instead of fearing it, you can actually see it as a service, not just to you, but also to the relationship with your customers.
Yeah.
One, that you trusted them enough to ask for their opinions, and then it's all a loop. So the trust begins by asking them for their input, and the trust, I wouldn't say the loop closes, the loop continues. The loop actually, it closes the loop so that it can continue, is then you implement some of the most important things that they said, and you can actively show them what you've done. That's a big part. So it helps to create that level of service for yourself, but also for them. It kind of helps your company as you grow or just evolve. Like, the one thing that's constant in our business, in our industry, is change. And we're in we're in a phase right now of so much change.
Drastic.
And feedback, constantly being with the finger on the pulse of what's important to your customers and to others in our industry, to yourselves. That's what helps you to really navigate how to get through all of this and to continue doing what you do. Sometimes we avoid, I love this note that you put in here, the discloses hidden issues. And sometimes you hid them, you're avoiding them. And if it starts to come out in the feedback, then it's absolutely time to focus in on them. And ultimately, where you go to next, if you have to quickly pivot, that's where a lot of that. Take your clients out to lunch when there's no project going on. Ask them if they want to just go out to lunch. We just want to chat. We're not talking about projects. We're not pitching or anything. We just want to talk and get into that active role with them. If it's not lunch, just see if they have 15 minutes, 30 minutes for a Zoom or a phone call. See if they're open to that. Just having those conversations. Change is constant, and feedback is a big part of that. I think one of the big things for us is I think the name of the show is How Not to Fuck Up Your Business. And that's one of the most important things that you could avoid is if you avoid feedback, it's one of the quickest way to fuck up your business. So that idea of extreme ownership and accountability and customer relationships, feedback is at the center of all of that. Brian, why did that shift matter to us? Like, what was it about when we think about sort of our very survival?
Well, you can't pivot if you don't accept the things you're doing wrong. You cannot prove to your clients that you will continually do better and better and better by them. You cannot continually grow. And if you can't continually grow, you can't reach new clients. You've got what you've got. You're not expanding. You will not expand beyond this. This is a wall. And if you can't get over it or around it, you will stay on that side of the wall. So for us to be able to look in the mirror, know what we've done wrong, as well as what we've done right, and celebrate both as a growth mindset, then we don't, if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to get over or around that wall. We should be stuck where we are. And so for us, survival is really just about saying, we can take it. We're asking you to come along for the ride. Now we have to come along for the ride.
Yeah.
And that's it's a little more metaphorical and esoteric, but in the heart of it is exactly what it needs to be there. And I think it can salvage, in the end, it can salvage a relationship that you didn't know was dying. Think about that. If they're not saying something that needs to be said, and you're not asking something that needs to be said, you're actively smothering that possibility. So don't. Let's not. Let's nurture a relationship that could otherwise be dying.
Yeah.
I think that really is all I can say on that level. Are you looking for something else from me?
No. I couldn't have said that any better. I think that's spectacular, and I love that idea that that's a relationship that you could be losing because you didn't do the simple act of reaching out and asking those questions. So I think to wrap up, I think the biggest tip here is to embrace feedback, and I think importantly, systemize it. Make it a part of the process throughout the entire endeavor. Find ways that feedback happens as part of your conversation with folks as you're nurturing them during the actual project, which some of it happens naturally, some you can just ask for. But then afterwards, having a real process that gives them the ability to really speak out and share with you what their experience left them feeling. I think that's the biggest thing. Create that process and that system for yourself. It will pay off dividends. On a side note, I would even consider having just a short little survey that you can send out to people who maybe the deals didn't close with you. You were one of 4 that they were interviewing for a project. Send it out. You won't get 100% returns on them. Usually once they've said yes to someone else, they ignore all the others. But you might get 10%. And in that 10%, there might be some really good candid reasons for why. Sometimes it's not a fit, but sometimes there might have been something that you could improve in your sales approach. But first, focus on your customers, your clients, and be open to that feedback. I love this topic, and I'm really glad that we touched on it today, Brian. But for everyone out there, thanks for joining us. Let us know, are you avoiding the feedback? Are you skirting your way around it and avoiding the hard conversations? Is there something that you know about your business that you're just plain hiding and avoiding? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for joining us.
Stay safe, stay healthy.